Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. My name's Nigel and I'm going to be putting a couple of solar panels onto my camper van in this video. So I currently have two 100 watt panels on there and it's just not enough for what I need. I have a 200 amp hour battery and my charge controller is capable of taking about 560 watts. So I've bought two 180 watt panels and I'm going to be putting them onto the camper van in series so that I get a total of about 160 watts on that van. And so my charge controller has a bit of headroom built into it for sort of overcharging. So if you're not aware, sometimes solar panels, if they're in really strong sunlight and if the temperature is right, they can actually produce more wattage than their rated capacity. So if you have an array of 560 watts of solar panels, they can actually produce up to about 20 or 25% more than 560 watts. So my charge controller, I think, can take an absolute maximum charge of about 720 watts. So with this setup, I should have a bit of headroom still, so that if I get into a situation where the panels are producing more than their rated capacity, I won't blow the charge controller, but I'll be pretty much at the max of what I can take in that charge controller to make full utilization of the sun that's available. So I live in Ireland, so the chance of me ever hitting that 20% threshold is pretty slim and low because we just don't get that much direct sunlight overhead. And I'm going to be putting the panels just flat on the top of the roof, so they're never going to be perpendicular to the sun and absorbing the full capacity, or they won't ever be in a position where they can get that full capacity, I don't think, unless I go to southern Europe somewhere like Portugal or somewhere like that, where the sun is nicely overhead, really strong, but then the temperature is going to be high. So some panels often will perform better in lower temperatures than higher temperatures anyway. So all of these factors to take into consideration, but either way, I'm going to be maxing out the charge controller so that I can use the full sunlight that's available to me and charge those batteries. So yeah, let's get going.
So the first thing that I did was to get onto my camper van and clean the roof. So my camper van is stored out in the elements just on my driveway, and so it gets pretty dirty up there, just loads of bird poop and algae and general sort of wear and tear and dirt from the elements, as you can see here. So I just had a hot bucket of water, or a bucket of hot water rather, with some soap, and I just scrubbed everything down, then sprayed it down with a hose pipe once everything was loose and got it nice and clean. I then just left it for a good while to dry out in the sun. We had a bit of wind that day, so it dried quite nicely. I then marked out where all of my brackets would go onto the solar panels and started fitting those. I actually couldn't find brackets that I liked, so I landed up making some just out of aluminium angle iron, as you can see here. So the one side is longer than the other on the angle, and this meant that the shorter side I bolted onto the solar panel frame, and then the longer side was the flat surface that would allow me to glue it onto the roof. So I had a problem there with the one bolt and it stripped, so I landed up grinding it off and then putting another one in its place. So this worked pretty well. This is the back that I'm doing here, just with two short feet like that. That's all that's really necessary. The back of the panel and the sides really is just for support, just to hold it down. It's really the front that gets the most drag when you're driving. Here in Ireland it's quite windy, so these side ones were essential just to stop those sort of side winds, gusts that would catch the panel when the vehicle's stationary. But I'm pretty happy with how that would work and how strong it'll be. I then spun the panel around and started putting the strip on the front. So I went for a piece that went right across the whole width of the panel for the front of the vehicle here, because that's obviously the bit that'll get the most wind drag, and bolted that on nicely. I then cleaned all of them down with just a piece of sponge with hot water and soap, again just to remove any oily residue. Ground it down a little bit with a wire brush on my drill to roughen up the surface, and cleaned everything off with my airbrush. I then carried the panels up onto the roof to start fitting them. So the roof had dried pretty nicely. I had some blue roll up there as well with a bit of sandpaper just to do final drying off of the roof, but it was pretty much dry at this point. But I just wanted to make double sure, just wipe down the roof with the blue roll just to make sure everything is good. So once I had the panel onto the roof, I then just needed to check where it would go and mark it all off, which is what I was doing here, just to make sure that everything would fit. So put the panel down, mark off where the feet would be so that I had a reference point, and then sanded down the roof a little bit. So a lot of these roofs are painted over either plastic or aluminum. In my case, it's aluminium sheeting that makes this roof. So I sanded that down a little bit before I put the panel on. I put a generous helping of Cycloflex 522 onto the bracket and stuck the panel down. I put a couple of boxes from my garage just onto the panel as a weight to compress everything and push out the Cycloflex and make sure that there was good contact on all of the area of the brackets that I had made. So getting these panels onto the roof was a little bit cumbersome. They're quite unwieldy and big, so a bit of work to get them up there without damaging them or scratching the top of the vehicle. Just move the cables out of the way and then start the process again. So turn it over onto the feet, put it down gently, line it all up, mark it off, sand down the areas where the Cycloflex needs to stick, wipe everything down with blue roll, and then put the Cycloflex onto all of the feet. You can see a really generous helping here. I wanted a good thick piece on the base, especially this panel that will be getting the most of the wind force from the front of the vehicle. Put a couple of toolboxes on there just to weigh everything down and position it finally, get it all straight before the Cycloflex sets. Overall, pretty happy with how it all turned out. Looks pretty good, nice and strong and accessible, good airflow underneath the panels so it can cool them, which they need when they are working when it's really hot. But yeah, overall pretty chuffed with that. I just connected them in using the MC40 connectors just in series into the existing panels, and they are working great. Thanks for watching.